Hey, what's up? How you doing? Today I'm going to be sharing with you a pizza recipe that I have been making many times over the past year. Probably way too many times. But because I have made it so often, I have pretty much got it down perfect to the way that I like it. So to me, it's like my perfected pizza recipe. I know this isn't really my typical type of content, but fun fact about me, I really like to cook and bake, and what better time to learn a new recipe when everybody's quarantined and you need something to do and you need to eat. So this is like combining both of those things. It's a win-win. So let's just get started, shall we? First things first is the dough. Arguably the most important part and what took the longest for me to get exactly how I like it. So let me show you how I make it. First things first is the flour, of course. 2 cups to be exact. So just plop that on into a bowl and spill some, of course, because it's not cooking if you don't make a mess. Next is just a little bit of salt. No need to go overboard, just about a teaspoon. Of course, you're gonna need some yeast to make that dough rise. I use instant yeast. This is about a half a tablespoon. Then I'm also putting about a half a tablespoon of sugar in there as well. Next is garlic powder. Now this one really is a matter of personal taste. I definitely recommend using garlic powder, but the amount you use is reliant upon how much garlicky flavor you like. If you like garlic bread and that kind of stuff, then you're gonna want more garlic powder in your dough. I use quite a bit, around a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. Next is seasoning. You gotta season it. Very important. Italian seasoning, because pizza is Italian. Again, this is reliant upon your taste buds, how much you want to use. I use quite a bit. That's where a lot of the flavor comes from, is within the seasoning, and I like a lot of flavor in my dough. And then you just want to mix that all up, stir it around, give it a good swoosh. Next, the 2 wet ingredients are olive oil and water. So I use about a tablespoon of olive oil. I don't measure it, I just sort of dump it in there, but you can eyeball it or you can measure it, but about a tablespoon is the amount to use. And then about a cup of warm water. I recommend using warm because it just helps activate the yeast. Now you want to make sure your dough is a doughy consistency, obviously. You don't want it to be too dry and you don't want it to be too sticky. You just need to keep adding water as needed, basically. But don't start with too much, because it's easier to keep adding more water than to keep adding more flour, which is what you do if it's too sticky. Like right here, you can see that this is sticking to my fingers pretty badly. So I added just a little bit more flour and mixed that in. You should be able to toss it around in your hands and it should be like firm and stay in place. Then you're gonna add a little bit of olive oil into your bowl and drop that sucker right back on in there, and she's ready to rise. So preheat your oven to 475 degrees. I know that sounds kind of high. It's actually better to cook pizza on a higher temperature. That's why brick ovens are a thing for pizzas, because they can heat up really hot. Set your bowl on top of the oven and cover it. The heat from the oven is going to help the dough rise faster. Leave it for about 30 minutes. Come back, and like the Lord, it should have risen. Next up, clean a flat surface, like a countertop, which is what I use. Powder it with some flour and drop your dough on down there. And then knead it out a little bit. Make sure all the oil and whatnot is nice and spread out through the whole piece of dough. And this is where it comes in handy to have a rolling pin. I do not, even though I have made pizza a million times and I would love to have a rolling pin. That would be very useful for me. I've just never purchased one, so I use my hands. So your hands are fine, but if you have a rolling pin, that makes life easier. Then to shape the dough, I usually just put it on the pizza pan and shape it that way. So that way I don't have to deal with like transferring a perfectly shaped thing and then having to reshape it. I just shape it right on the pan. And you know, I know it's not a perfect circle. It gives it character. Then you're gonna poke holes with a fork all throughout the dough to help it breathe or whatever. And next is the sauce. I don't make homemade sauce. You can if you want. To be honest with you, I'm fine with the canned stuff. I know that might be like a sin to some people, but gonna be honest with you, I think it tastes fine. I have tried multiple different kinds. My favorite is this Prego pizza sauce. Then you're just gonna wanna spread that on out. Most of it should go in the center of the pizza, but I also add some to the crust, like the sides, because it gives it a little bit of flavor. Like I said, I like my crust to be very flavorful, so extra sauce on the crust does that. Next is the cheese. I use a block of mozzarella and I do not grate it. Plop it on there in chunks. That sounds appetizing, doesn't it? If you've ever seen like a margarita pizza, kind of like that style, where you just put chunks of the cheese onto the pizza. Make sure though that they're similar sized, because if you have some big ones and some small ones, the small ones are going to get burnt basically, or the big ones are not going to get cooked well enough. Like, you just want to make sure that they are the same or similar-ish sizes. Then I do add some shredded mozzarella cheese just in the gaps. When you bake it, the chunks of cheese, that sounds so gross, the chunks of cheese will melt down and fill in the gaps in between them, as long as you like don't make the gaps huge. But I also add the shredded mozzarella cheese just as an additive because I really freaking like cheese. Then I also add triple cheddar on top of that, which might seem weird because cheddar cheese is not really a pizza kind of cheese, but my argument for that is any cheese is a pizza cheese if you put it on pizza. And honestly, it does taste good. You don't have to put it if you don't want it, but I like it. Also, I didn't put it on this video because I didn't have any at the time, but I also like to put shredded Parmesan whenever I have it around. Next, pepperonis. You can put whatever toppings you want on there because this is your pizza, but I'm just putting pepperonis because that's what I had, and it's typically all I really use. Very basic, but here it is. Here's the finished, not cooked yet pizza. Pop that sucker on in the oven for anywhere between 12 and 20 minutes, depending on how you like your pizza cooked. I think this was after about 13, 14-ish minutes. But this is it. This is the pizza. Here's some up close glamour shots because that's all you need in your life is pizza glamour shots. But anyway, yep, that's the recipe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you can give it a like. You can also subscribe to me if you would like. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.